Hello, this is Laurelle Timms with Better Life Realty. I'm here with my friend today, John Drennen from Fairway Mortgage. I just wanted to do a quick introduction before we get started about why today is still a good time to buy a home.
Thank you very much, Laurelle. Yes, today is an amazing time to buy a house compared to 2 years ago. Yes, interest rates are higher, but there's so many benefits to buy a house in late 2022, early 2023 that people really don't recognize.
Okay, so can you give us an example?
So about 18 months ago, how many houses did we have on the market approximately?
Not very many, less than 2,000.
Yes. And I know today, give or take, it can go up or down, but how many houses are on the market now?
Probably around 8,000 to 10,000 given the day. Inventory is dropping right now because it's the end of the year. No one likes to put their house on the market at the end of the year.
Perfect. So right there, we have a supply and demand issue that was in 2020, 2021, and early 2022. So now what do we have? We have upwards of 4 to 5 times the amount of houses. So a client can go out there and actually have negotiating power. When my clients were coming to me in the last 2 years, they were what? Paying their own closing costs.
Absolutely.
They were typically overpaying for the house.
Yes.
And they did not have many selections, so they could not negotiate improvements or repairs with the seller.
Correct. There was basically no repairs being done by the seller. HOA fees were not being paid by the seller. Closing costs were not being paid by the seller. Today we're seeing a much different story. Today we are definitely seeing closing costs being a contribution from the seller. We're seeing help in buying down a rate. We're seeing HOA fees being paid by the seller. We're seeing repairs being made again. That was a nice change to see.
Yep.
So that
home warranties being paid by the seller.
So there's a lot more options for the buyer in terms of not having to come out of pocket. And I'm guessing you saw a lot of people coming out of pocket.
Oh, yes. You figure, as an example, on a $500,000 transaction, the borrower had to put down their down payment, their closing cost, and potentially overpay. And I think in my experience, the typical overpayment was about $50,000, ranging from as low as pay what it's worth, $5-10 grand, all the way up to maybe like $100,000 in the Las Vegas market. And I think when we talked earlier, Laurelle, you can kind of confirm that was about your approximate too.
Absolutely. I had several sellers that definitely took advantage of the market. They had renovated the home beautifully, and the buyers definitely saw that as a benefit, that they didn't have to do it, and they definitely paid over.
Yes, they did. But you know what? They were happy to, because maybe they sold their house in another state. Maybe they made good money that way. Maybe their Bitcoin was going out of control. Their stocks and bonds were all gaining. And guess what? They were getting interest rates of high 2s, low 3s. Sadly, that market is done. But here is why, once again, today is the best time to buy a house, because of all the benefits. There's only one negative, and that's interest rates higher.
Correct.
Okay, so if your payment is higher because your interest rates are higher, but you don't have to come out of pocket for the repairs, you don't have to come out of pocket for closing costs, you don't have to overpay, your break even, the difference between what you would come out of your pocket with if you had a 3% or 3.5% mortgage versus now might be 3, 4, 5, 6 years.
Yes.
And what are the experts saying? They're saying in 2023 rates should be going down as soon as inflation is curbed, and those numbers are being in a very positive light, i.e. inflation is slowing down. And then also in 2024, there are a lot of experts that believe the interest rates will be back in the 4% range. So if you buy a house now in the 6 range, or maybe 7, depending on how you're buying it, and you can refinance in, let's say, 24 months for simplicity, I guarantee you your pure out-of-pocket is going to be much, much less if you refinance in 24 months versus overpaying and paying $15,000 to $20,000 in closing costs on maybe a $500,000 to $600,000 house.
Absolutely. And, we don't want to talk about a negative, but the median price is coming down. So you're still going to be buying the same type of house at less money. Exactly.
But I want to add something about prices coming down. Traditionally, during these tough times in a recessionary period, guess what? You're still going to get appreciation.
Yes.
So the market is coming down, but it's more shifting and getting back to where it should have been because it was so overly inflated. And that's another thing. If you buy a house now and if you have that 6% range or maybe 7% range and you lose out into a simple 3 to 5% appreciation for the next 2 years, you may be leaving on the table $10, $20, $30, $50,000 in lost appreciation because you're afraid to buy now because the interest rates are a tad higher.
Absolutely. And I do think the market was definitely overinflated. We've been saying for 2 years it needed to be corrected, that it couldn't sustain itself. We've been saying that for 2 years.
We all have. Yes, we have.
And we have we are just now seeing it kind of correct itself, settle back down into something more reasonable for everybody.
But one thing I want to add at the very, very end of this wonderful conversation is a lot of people are in fear that the market is going to collapse. Please understand that the housing collapse created the last recession. The recession did not create the housing collapse. And after that housing collapse, there have been a lot of federal laws and guidelines and regulations that we must follow to make sure that people have the ability to repay on these loans. So the liar loans and the stated incomes and the no docs that were done back in the 90s and the early 2000s, those loans don't exist. So the likelihood, especially with still the supply and demand nationwide, the likelihood of a housing collapse is very minimal. Probably closer to zero. All we're doing is doing a more natural correction. I appreciate that word, natural correction. And the fact of the matter is everybody knew the correction was going to happen. They just didn't think interest rates would double, almost triple within a short period of time.
Overnight, pretty much.
Exactly.
It was like a switch. But
that's what it was.
But let's keep going on that, actually, because we've been having conversations at our team meetings about the fact that this is not the same as the last time, and everything you just stated is absolutely correct. People have more equity in their homes, even though the market is correcting a little bit and it's not quite as crazy as it was. It's probably about where it should be. Prices are still above where they were last year in terms of the median. And so it's not that it's crashing, it's definitely correcting. But it's definitely not the same as the last time. And yes, the stated incomes where people were buying houses with really no
anything
to be proven that they could afford it.
Exactly,
so,
100%.
Absolutely. And so people aren't walking away from their houses. I don't think we're going to see a bunch of foreclosures like we saw last time. And most of the people I speak with agree that we're not going to see it. So
exactly. And worst case scenario, if you'd got to leave Vegas, something tragic happened, maybe a loss of a loved one or medical, people have the equity.
Absolutely.
They can sell. They can move into to somewhere else in the United States where it's less pricey. Definitely not like San Jose, but I was jokingly saying maybe Des Moines, Iowa, right? And so take your equity. People are not just going to walk away from their houses because they're not going to be hundreds of thousands of dollars upside down. So once again, other than the interest rate currently being higher, which scares people, historically interest rates go up and down. This is a great time to buy. And if you can buy now and in the next 18 months to 24 months, refinance into a more long-term interest rate, hopefully back in the 4s-ish, then long-term, you're going to have the house you want. You're going to have negotiated an amazing price, closing costs, repairs, everything you need. And people need to stay away from the media and all the negativity. If you want the truth about what's going on in the real estate market and in the mortgage world, mortgage industry here in Las Vegas, please contact us today.
Yes, absolutely. So we're going to focus on always telling the truth and not making a sensational video. How about that?
Exactly. Well, thank you very much.